Okay, so let's get started. We're going to look at the Django Models and Admin tool this time around. This is really this is the backbone of the Django environment. Now, there's a front end that we're going to talk about in subsequent presentations that has some really good CMS style content management system style interfaces and tools and templates. So it does allow you to spin up a website that looks pretty good with a minimal amount of work. It's got built-in pieces so that you can use templates and code blocks and things like that and put together something that works within your general framework you would think of within a website where you've got like a constant, header or footer or navigation, side navigation or side ads or messages or, just things like that. Those sort of components that you would see on page after page after page of a typical website. That front end stuff we'll get to a little later. This is where we're going to look at the back end side of it, the ability to quickly put together something from really a very simple CRUD app if you wanted to. And you actually don't even need, you don't need to create your own front end. You could actually use the administrative tool side of this to give you the back end and to enter your data and do what you need to there. So first, we're going to step back because it's been a little while. We're going to talk real quick. We're going to do a sort of a refresher of the Django admin piece. And we're going to talk about the models, which are really the data models. And we're going to start looking at how you flip those or mark those for administrative or admin tables and data. And then changes that we can do. So migrating changes and updates, what we touched on before. We're going to go a little deeper into that. And then some of the customizations that we can do to make our life easier. So the Django admin site, remember, we've got Django built on top of Python. So we go in, we can install Python, we install Django, and we can create an application, a Django application, and it provides us some stuff out of the box. One of them is an administrative site. So it has a front end and a administrative back end that's part of Django. Out of the box, it has security related stuff. So you can administer users and permissions and do some groups. You can create, which you would do normally. You're going to create an administrative user that's the first thing basically you're going to do so that you can use that user to log in and utilize the admin side. And creating it is super simple. You just call manage.py, create super user, and we'll take a look at that in a few minutes. And boom, you're off and running. You can create your user and you can create as many as you need to. And then once you log into the admin site, you can manage security and permissions. You can create groups, and which you can see some of the other places that is built into how it manages its backend and its data. And then we can actually edit the table data if we've got it turned on, essentially, if we turn a table on within the administrative side, which would be the admin.py file. And we're going to look at those a little bit as well. So in general, let's talk about models for the Django sense. In general, a model is going to have a table name that it's going to create, or whatever you call it. You're going to essentially define a class in this model.py file. And that is going to translate to it creating a table name with that all lowercase, and it's going to prefix the table name by your app name. So you could create with Django, you could actually create multiple apps. There's not a lot of examples because usually that I can think of off the top of my head, usually I'm going to do a single app. But if you think about it from where we see now mobile applications and things like that, you may have your own admin, not necessarily Django admin, but you may have an admin site. You may have a read-only site. You may have one that's really just an API that's hit by your mobile apps or some third parties. So there's these different views, which is really, if you want to think of it, I guess the easiest way, an app in Django is essentially a view into a database. And so I could have an app that would be, let's say, customer, and another one that is manager. Let's say I create two apps just to do that. Well, tables, I could have tables specific to one or the other of those. So I could have, customer audit table. I could have manager audit. And I could have different tables, different structures, everything else. Those would all exist in the same database, and I could figure those out by the app name. Also, there's Django level stuff that it throws in that are part of its internals. And so that allows me to quickly see, because they are not prefixed by that app name, that allows me to quickly see that those are the Django admin level tables. Again, we'll look at those a little bit later and show some examples. There is support, although all of our examples are going to be MySQL / MariaDB. It does support multiple different database types. Out of the box, it actually does SQLite. That's Django's default, is it creates a Django-lite file and store stuff that way. But there are many ways that you can connect. It's often used with MySQL or Postgres, but you can also, because this basically goes back to the drivers that you have, as long as you have database drivers for that specific type of database, put it up in your, set it up in your settings, and you're off and running. You don't have to do too much outside of, point to your database, tell it the kind of driver, give it your authentication information, and it'll build stuff out for you. What a model allows is a very simple class-based definition of data tables that allows you to quickly model, your object to a table in the database. And it's got for the most part, your standard database types. It allows the ability to do foreign keys, it has a default primary key that's just an ID. So you don't even have to see it. It is in there. That's sort of under the covers, but you don't have to actually define or figure out what your ID is. You just create your data. And so it becomes much more like a typical object-oriented approach, where you have an instance and you've got some data for the instance, and you could pass that instance around. Well, this takes that instance, allows you to store it off in a database, and it knows the ID for that instance, so it could also refer back and forth and pull it, update it, do all the other things it needs to. Now that's the general models. Now this admin site allows you to you've got these extra tables that are outside of an app. But it also allows you can actually essentially tag or point to models within an app or different apps, and essentially bring those into the admin side, essentially flag them and say, hey, along with the general admin tables you're going to provide for me, I want to provide these as well. You may ask where that would be useful. Well, definitely it would be useful in lookup tables. If you want a quick way to, for example, let's say you've got a table that's got a list of states names, and you want to be able to, quickly be able to edit data in that, or maybe you've got, depending on what your application is, maybe you've got like account types or user types or all these other phone types, address types. There's all these little lookup kinds of tables that we use. A lot of those would make sense to be, they're essentially it's an admin function to change the data in that. So you'd want to pull those in, even if they are an app-specific table. Now within this, you can quickly somewhat see links into other tables. It builds out, allows you to put selectors in, like drop-down selectors and things like that. It's got the ability to add searches and filters, and you can define how you want to display those data tables. So it's not, by default, it is sort of a brain dead display of the data, but it allows you to to customize that and to do some things that make it moderately to actually, you can probably make them actually extremely user-friendly if you really wanted to. It's all, at the end of the day, for, to simplify it almost too much, is it's all source code. So you could go back and change every little bit of this if you wanted to, but it also allows you some essentially some top level stuff where you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can customize to sort of the look and feel and the data and the way you want to manage your data. And you'll see again that these the tables that have been pushed over from an application into the admin side, we'll even be able to see by application what tables we've pulled over. So it allows us to sort of see where the source is of these tables and how we may use them. So let's work first. Let's spend a little time on that. So first, this is I just jumped right into the admin site, and it's really, I can log out, and all I have to do, now I gave it, oops, that's the wrong one. That takes me to my home page. If I go to an admin, this is your general, this is what you're going to see. That's your login, that you can do some customization to it, but pretty much why. It's a pretty simple kind of thing. And you have to go specifically to admin to get to it. Now, once you're in there, it does allow you can change the password for your user. You can actually go back and view the site. So it does allow you to bounce back over if you need to. But we're going to focus on the admin side first. So this top section, authentication and authorization, this is, and this would be, it's sort of like an app in itself. That is your built-in security pieces. So I can go see, I've got a couple of users that I've created. I can click on one and I can edit information. For the users, for the security, you can see it's actually got full features into it. So I could set myself up as a super user. I've got a staff, so it's whether I can log into the admin site or not, which is basically admin site access. Super user allows you to actually do everything in admin versus just being able to get to the admin site. For every table that I've got, I can set permissions, and you can see that these are built by these. You can hopefully see here, like here's admin, here is general the auth app, essentially, so authentication. And then this RSS app is the one app that I created, so I can actually see these are all tables within it, and with each of those, I've got the CRUD permissions. We've talked about that a little, so I'm not going to go too far into that. So once that's the admin side. Now we also have these app related. So I've got this thing called RSS app that's the application. And so if I focus on that, let me go back to this. I also have a little audit back here, so I can see what is the recent actions that have been taken on anything, on data, on anything about it. So I do get to see a little audit trail. I can also limit people so that they may not see like authentication authorization. They could see only the RSS app. So this may be what they would be limited to. Now, each of these tables, each of these is a table. And so if I look, this is that table data. It's not a full, as you can see. Well, for example, here I've got 3 fields that I display, but if I wanted to go edit data, this is actually all of the fields within that. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fields. Now, this is so I can go in, and this was given to me. I didn't have to set any of this part up. Once I created this table, it's smart enough to figure these things out based on type. So here And I'm going to go show you these in a second. But here, so this is text, and it gives you a nice little text entry. If it's a longer, well, actually, I think that's essentially a varchar. If you get something that's a longer text, a description, then it's going to give you this multi-line edit. It knows what dates are, so it allows you to do date times. And then this actually is a foreign key. So this actually, from this feed item table, it has a link, foreign key, to the feed table. And so here, it allows me to show what, select which one that is. Now within this, if I have to, and it allows me to add, so I could actually flip from here, and that's going to get me over to the feed table, and I actually can create a new feed. So it's from a data entry and content management. I don't know if there's a history here. Yeah, so I don't really have a history here. It's a really quick way to browse your data and to make changes to your data. So I've got, these 3 statuses. If I wanted to create one, then I could create one real quick, which would be, let's say I want to do, let me do this. So I can come in, I can save, and I can continue editing. I can add another, or I can just save, and it's going to kick me back to it. If I go back to, just to show, so the one thing it allowed me to add feeds, if I wanted to come here and do an ad, even though it did the pop-up before, here I can go in and pull it. And it does take into account things like required fields and stuff like that. If I want to add, I can go directly and add in a record. If I want to change, then it's going to ask me essentially which record do I want to change. Now you may see here, like here's a good example. This one, this lookup target, I've got a name and a description when I look at the detail. When I look at feeds, oh, that's not the one I want to look at. If I look at feed items, then I've got a title, a short link, and a description. And so those are some things we're going to take a look at in a bit. There are some, so those are some of those customizations we're going to run into. Let's see. So when I go, let me go back to, let me flip over and let's see if I can blow this up enough. I don't know if I can blow this up enough. So, but what I am going to do is try to do this in a way that you can see it. So if I do, I want to show the create super user. So if I do that, which is just this little, I just call Python manage create super user. Then all it does is it's going to ask me for a username. It steals my Rob as what I'm logged into on this thing. So I could call this, I'm just going to call this my admin. It's going to be my name. I give it a pass or an email address. And I'm just going to say, it doesn't really matter what that is because I'm going to have to be able to email to it. And then my password. And then I password again. Oops. If I can do them right. Oh, password's too common. I did something. Yes, and so I'm going to go ahead and do it, even though I used a really stupid password. So now I'm going to go over back to where I was and show you real quick where if I go to users, am I on the same place? May not be. Let me try this. I may have been in the wrong app. Oh, I bet that is it. I bet you I'm in the, where am I? Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Okay. Let's go back to, apologies there. Okay, so now if I create this, this is going to be, let's call it tester, instead of test.com. Now, now if I go back and go to users, I can see where he's been added, and he's automatically, because I did a super user, then he's already a super user, and I could always come back here and essentially delete them or deactivate them if I want to. And I think I can delete. So I'm going to go ahead and delete, and it does a validation as you would expect, and now I'm back to the user. So that's a really quick, and you can see here that we can do some searches and things like that are and filters that we can actually build these into our tables as well. And I don't think I have any of those yet. So let me check that real quick. Yes, I did not turn those on yet in this one. So let's go and flip back. Let's see. That was sort of actually, let's go ahead and tackle this a little bit more. I want to look a little bit at the code. And actually, let me see if I can get something that's a little bigger. Let's do this. So I want to look at some of these models and show you what those look like. So within a given model, as you can see, each of these, as I mentioned, are defined as a class. And so I can take, for example, and create a class called feed item. And we looked at this one, that we had the text fields. If you remember, we had the inputs. Let me go back over to that real quick. When we looked at these, well, one, we had these 3 items here, but also remember we had the inputs and we had the larger text and we had the data. Well, if we look at that guy, we can see there's a char field, which are the inputs, even though this link thing is actually can be very long. It just limits it, and it gives you a single line input. When you use a text field for, say, description, you get the multi-line edit. And then we can see here we've got a date time field. And then feed is actually, here we can see that it's a foreign key. It's a foreign key to the feed table, which is up here. And you see that here. Now, with this thing, you can see that it lists these items. That is defined here as what you have is with any given class. And this will probably feel somewhat familiar. Usually you've got some way, if you've built a class and you're really wheeling and dealing with those classes and instances within code, it's either by default, like you have in Java in some places where you have essentially a toString that it will do by default, and then you can overwrite it. That's essentially what you've got here, is you've got this string thing, and that's what it's going to use to generate the items that are in this. Oops, let me do it this way. That are in this list. And so what I do here is I say, well, if I want to find out the easiest way to determine what a feed is, I'm going to do it based on the name. And self is like this, depending on what language you're used to, but usually the current instance I'm dealing with is a this or a self. In Python, it's a self. And so you can see with these, I've got some cases where it's actually a typo. That should be name. But sometimes I use this name value. Here, I use the title. So if I were going to see a drop down of feed items, it would be based on title because there is no name. Let's see. And I don't know if I have another one. So like here I actually can go into, because it's a class, this user feed item has a foreign key to the feed item, foreign key to a user, and then a status integer. Well, if I want to see a list of user feed items, it's actually going to go into the feed item and grab its title. So I can actually grab values out of foreign key relationships. Now, you may see also these are classes, so I can come in and I can actually build out some some methods based, for that class. And we can look at some things like this. I'm not going to get too far into right now. I'm not going to get too far into some of the customizations you can do to the columns, but other than to note that you can. So you can see, as we've seen with a few of these, you've got like a max length. This one actually says whether something can be blank or whether it can be true. And those are some validations it'll run into when we look at migrations and things of that nature. From the admin side, let me show you an admin real quick. So admins actually can be very simple, because what we did is we've got all of our models built over in this models.py, and that is for this application level models. This is in the RSS app. This is its models. On the app side, then we can see here, I'm actually importing essentially from RSS app models. I'm taking the feed item, lookup target, and lookup status. I'm saying I want to make those available, and then I do that by creating a class for each of those that is going to end up being registered to the admin site. So I could do them directly, but this is really what you want to do, because it allows you to have a admin interface into that, and you can actually customize it. And this is where you can see, for example, here where I've got title, short link, and description are used. You can see where I use for the display title, short link, and description. And you can see in these others I use name and description. And there's some additional work that we're going to be able to do within these on the admin site to spruce them up, as it were. Let's see, and I want to go to this guy. All right, so we've talked about the models, we've talked about the admin side. Let's talk about changes to those things. Now, these classes really tie back to tables in the database. So we need the ability, if we're really going to manage our database through this, we want the ability to add a table, remove a table, change column attributes. Maybe we want to change from a text field to just a character field, or vice versa, or an integer to a string, or however we want to do it. Sometimes we may want to add a column, delete a column, and we may want to change relationships. So we may want to do foreign key relationships. We may want to link these things differently. We may want to set up indexes and stuff like that. All of those are essentially migration options, where we take the database that we had and we want to apply these changes and have a quote, a new database. And ideally, we want to do that without blowing away everything that's in the database. And that is what we get with the migration feature. Now, the way Django handles model changes to your data model, is it builds steps. It would be essentially like you going in and manually doing SQL statements to do alters or inserts, or well, I guess not insert, that's more data, but alters and drops and creates and things of that nature. So instead of having to know how that's done in SQL, Django allows you to skip that and just manage it through your models.py. And typically, that's where your models.py is going to be your really your track record, your audit log of changes, as long as you're committing changes to that. And that's really where you're going to hold everything. That is your one-stop shop for your schema and how it works and how it's defined. It's easy to make changes. You just call make migrations. It looks at the data model and the table, the models.py. It finds the changes and it creates, it goes in and creates a series of change commands. You can actually verify those. You can take a look at those, and we'll look at that in a few minutes here. And then you migrate and you say, okay, we'll apply this to the database. So it's really straightforward. And then within that, then there's some options that you can do within your model to, which I talked about a little bit. There's some things that you can do to allow you to do things like, set things to null or to blank or some other things that you're going to need, because when you're making these changes, you're going to run into situations where maybe you want to add a non-nullable field, but you already have data, so you have to take care of the case where all of this data that exists, it obviously would have a null field for that. So how do you handle that? And it allows you to make some changes along the way to incorporate those as well without having to resort to SQL. Well, let me see. Let me go back to this to see. First, let's make sure I've got that up here. So let's blow this guy up a little bit. Now the key, and this link will be in the notes and the slides, which I have right here. If you really want to get complex, then this page really goes through all of the things that you can do within a model to define it out. So to create your model structure within the classes within Django. And it has some pretty powerful stuff. It has things like you can use essentially enumerated fields. So I could come in here, and instead of having to create a table for you're in school, I can just hard code the data in, and it's going to create stuff for me. It's going to link that stuff out. I can use enumerated types. I can use sorts. I can use filters. I can use date times. I can use integers. I can do a foreign key. I can actually set default values. So I can say whatever the default value is for a field, whether it's going to show as editable or not within the admin. You can see here there's stuff related to how it works in the ad. There's things like help text you can add, so that if you hover that value within your application, you're going to see the help text will pop up. Whether it's unique, you can do, like I said, indexes. You've got all of these different field types, big, integers, binaries, booleans, characters, dates, date times, decimals, durations, and these things translate back on the admin side to user controls, user experience, and GUI controls, and things like that. So there's and it's this, as you can probably see now, it's actually a rather lengthy series of things and extensions and properties that you can use in building your model. And it's worth it if you ever want to actually really build out a database using Django. Then this would be a page that you'd want to start with. Let's see. That being said, I want to do some migration. So let me show you. Let's go to this where I can see it a little bit bigger. When you make migrations, it actually creates a file every time. It's a little harder to see this over on the left. But what I can see here is I can see my entire history of migrations that I've made, of changes I've made to models over time. And so I can see here's the initial one. And this comes in, and it's the first two things I did apparently is I created, there was a feed and a temp that I created. And then after that, I came in and I deleted temp, and I removed some fields I removed feed ID from feed, probably because initially, I created a feed ID, not paying attention that there was under the covers, they already created an ID field for me. And then I came in later and I created the feed item table. And so I can actually walk through this, and you can see up here, dependencies. So if I go into a fresh database that doesn't even exist, then this thing's going to come in and say, here's the pieces that need to be built before I get to this one. So it'll actually go in, if I go down to this one, it says like here, it's going to say, I needed to create this 14 has to be run first. Well, it goes to 14, and he says, you need to create 13 first. 13 says you have to create 12 first. 12 says you have to create 11 first. So it actually has, through these series of changes, it gives you the entire history of your database. And now if I look, for example, at a database, I don't want to do this. This is probably, I'm going to do it this way. So let me kill out of this for a second. And I hope this is the right database. There we go. This is going to be a little harder to see just because of the way this works. Sure, I've got the right database. So I'm going to use RSS Reader. It's sort of hard to see here, but I've got, let me try to see if I can do this in a bigger way. So you can sort of see what a table looks like, or what the tables look like. Blow this up. I can't blow this up too much, but it's at least a little bigger. You can see here, this is an example of a database that's been built. And you can see where I talked about this. You've got the auth prefix for the tables that are that auth app. I've got the built-in Django tables, and then there's this app that's called RSS app, and then so each of the tables, each of these models, if you remember, had feed item, lookup stats. Each of those are created with this RSS app prefix. So if I wanted to come in here to my models, actually, let's flip back over here. And look at this one real quick. And then look at this table real quick for you. I think I called it mentor. Yes. So this little guy that I'm building, this mentor app that I was playing around with, if we look at this models, I've got feed, lookup target, lookup status, and feed item. And you can see down here, hopefully, where I've got mentor underscore feed, because that's mentor is my app in this case, feed item, lookup status, and lookup target. Now let's say I wanted to create a new table, and I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call it lookup type, and it's going to have a name, a description, and let's give it a code, just to give it 3 fields. Whoop. And let's keep it a length of 4. Oh, and let's just do a created date to it as well, just because. So I've just saved this, created this class real quick. I've said, hey, I'm going to have to track a type. So in doing so, now I can come back here and I can, remember we use that make migrations, and I'm going to do it for the app name of Mentor. Actually, I think if I do it without, I don't know if it'll pick it up or not. Yes, it will. So although it's hard to see here, I did make migrations, and it went in and it said, hey, I've created this new migration file, and what I'm doing is creating lookup type, which is this table that I just looked at. And if I look at migrations, so it created this 0002. If I look, then it created this thing that says within the migration, I'm going to create a name, model, a table called lookup type. It's going to have ID, which note, I did not actually have an ID here. This is that under the covers, it automatically creates an ID that is the primary key. It's auto created, it auto increments and all that good stuff. And then I've got a name, a code, created, and description are the tables. If I do migrate, so make migration says, hey, I want to make those scripts. I could make changes to this if I wanted to, but then basically what it's going to come through, if I say migrate, then it's going to execute that migration And so now if I go back to my database, I'm going to see that lookup type is already created. And if I look at that lookup type, oops, it's mentor underscore, because that is the app I use. I'm going to see that it has ID, name, code created, and description. I'm going to see the sizes are what I would expect here, where I said a max length of 20 and 4. Those are varchar fields. And then I've got this other one, the max length of 50. So I was able to quickly create a table, update it in my database, and I could be off and running if I wanted. So if I wanted to, let's flip back to the one I was using. Yes, we'll switch back to the one I was using. And if I look at here and I look at, oops, not forms, if I want models. So I've got, if you look on this one example I was using the admin, I only have 4 tables that are set up in the admin. And if I look there for RSS app, I can see that I've got my 4 tables. But let's say I wanted to add one. So let's say I created a new table and wanted to flip that over to the admin side. So let's say I wanted to take, let's see, what's something I don't have here? Oops, that's the wrong models. If I look at his models, let's say I want to take user feed. Do I have user feed item post? I do not. Okay, so let's say I want to take user feed item post, and I'm going to have that one show up on the admin. I want to start being able to work within that information. Well, with that one, all I have to do is come over to admin. I'm going to import that table from the models. So I'm bringing that class in. And then I'm going to create a admin for it. And we're just going to call it, what I call it, user feed item post admin. And so the fields I'm going to display for that are, let's do status created post date. Let's do status created or status post date, and I'm going to use something off the user feed item, which will be and I'm going to just use user feed item. Let's see if that works, because I think that's going to bring me. So here I'm going to do, is that where it was? Yeah, user feed item, post date, and status. And then all I have to do is register it. I call that UFIP admin. And the table is user feed item post. I need to make sure I use a proper case. And do that. And the value of this display, which is not callable. So I can't use user feed item post directly. So instead, if I look over to that on models, user feed item. So I'm going to try to use user feed item dot feed item dot title. Let's see if I can pull that, because I haven't tried that. So I'm actually going to go pretty far into this. Actually, he may not like that. Oh, I wonder if I probably need to call it this. It may be. There we go. Sorry. It has to be, because I'm calling a linked, so basically calling a class on that, then it requires me to use the proper case. So now if I go over, so if I go here, I'm going to see a new table show up. I can go to this user feed item posts. I can see where I'm listing it based on user feed item, which is, this is a lookup table, the title for that lookup table. and when it was posted and the status, and I can actually go click into this item and I can actually change my user feed item post. I can see here where I've got to drop down because this is a lookup. I can see that's a lookup into the user feed item, a lookup here to look up target, a lookup to status. It built all these user lookups for me, and this longer text field. So all this stuff it built for me like that. It took no time whatsoever to build a really a CRUD interface to my table. Now I cannot emphasize enough the field reference here, because there is a huge amount of stuff that it can provide, including oh, actually, this is on I want to look to the admin side. Oh, so that's there. So I want to go back over here. If I look at, oops, wrong one. You want to play around with admin. Oh, that's not the one I want. So I'm going to stick with this one. Now, within the admin itself, the only thing I'm shown here is the display. Now, there are, this. I want to get this. Because this gets really complex quickly. Oh, I mentioned before things like searches and things of that nature. We can go in and do, let's see, did it have it here? It does not have it on this one. So let me go back. Oh, whoop, go back over to here. Actually, can I see it? Probably can see it better here. So let's just play with it on this one. So we talked only about this list display, and bringing this up. But there are other things we can add. So, for example, let's do this. Well, actually, let's do it over here. Although you won't be able to see it as much. So this guy I just created, this feed on post. Let's add some search fields. So if I want to search for something, and it works the same way. So I'm going to do, I believe I called it description. So the feed item post has a description. So I'm going to search within the description. Whoops. And let's order it. So I can do an ordering. And I'm going to do that based on post date. And I'm going to do filter horizontal. And I'm going to be able to filter on status. Oh, it's a one-to-many field. So must be a many-to-many field. So let's do, let's see if I can do it on user feed item. Oh, shoot. All right, I'm going to have to fix this one. Allow me to do a filter on this? Oh, I think that is it. Okay, there we go. Let's just do it on filter by status. And then let's flip back over. So I just added a search fields, ordering, and filter. So the ordering by post date is not going to be, where is that? Here it is. So here now I'm going to see that my post dates are ordered, and I can do that ascending or descending. But I'm also going to see now I've added a search field. So I could do, let's search for AWS, and now I'm only going to get stuff that has AWS in the description, which is not necessarily a feed. So I can see, like here, let's say here where I've got AWS, I'm searching for it. This is actually the user feed item, not the description. If I go to the description, then I'm going to see where it does have AWS in the description. Now, that could seem a little confusing, but I can actually set up whatever, as many search fields as I want. And then with any one of these, I can quickly delete. And then I've got somewhere down here. Oh, and I can click to sort based on those as well, if I don't want to go with my my original sort, the default sort that I use. You can select all your basic stuff that you can do. So I can come in and I can actually go pretty deep into, where did that go? So I can go pretty deep into some of the things that I can add for a field. Let's do it over here so it's a little easier to see. So I've got, besides just the display, I can search on multiple fields if I wanted to. So I could come in and do it by like title and title and let's say short link. That would allow me to have multiple fields available. I can do ordering, which is my default. And of course, I can also filter by stuff if I wanted to. I can allow those kinds of things. So and this all becomes much like the models itself. There's a lot of customizations we can build into it, and we can do things that we can redefine fields. We can display, like if you noted here, I'm just using these field names. If I look at them on the admin app, where'd he go? Then you'll see that those are all, there are no spaces and they're full caps. I can actually customize those. Those actually go back. That's actually at the model level, which I'm going to see. There's things that are done in the model that actually impact both the admin side and the end user side. For example, if I add help text, let's see if I can, I don't know if I've got that on this one. Let me go check because I may be able to show it that real quick. Oop, that is it. Okay, so help text for user feed item post. So if I go to user feed item post, user feed item post, and if I do that on, I think that was the description. Yeah, so I can see, I'm sorry, it's not a hover. I can see I've got little help text there that this is what will be posted and supports HTML tags. If I look, there's my help text. So I can see that on the admin site. That'll also show up by default on the front end site, on the user site. So if I go, actually I can do that. So if I wanted to quickly do, go over to the site. Can I see, let's see. Oh, yes, I can, because I can go look at, if I look here, I don't have the ability to, at this point, I don't have the ability to actually see user feed item post on the front end. So apologies for that. But I would end up seeing essentially the same thing where I can easily throw help text together. Some of the basic stuff you'd think from a database, but then there's also things like being able to, you can change these so that you can have it display as certain things, sort of labeling defaults and stuff like that you can build into your models. And so you've really got, at this point, you've got, without doing too much, you've got a full data management tool. And you could actually slap this on top of a database. If you didn't want to work with like DB Visualizer or one of those kinds of tools, or Toad, or you name it, you could actually spin up a Django app, point it to a database, and it would build, and you just essentially assign out your admin.py file, point that to those tables, and boom, it's going to just have within, fairly quickly, a full CRUD interface into your application, making it awesome for CMS apps and stuff like that. And it includes permissions as well. So you could easily assign permissions to certain users. You could create a whole bunch of them and assign permissions so they can only edit certain tables and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a really powerful way to get going quickly on an application. So what do we learn? We've gone through, this has really been yet another crash course, but this one, I think more so, I mean, you could take what we've talked about in this one, and you could probably go with that without having to even dig into some of the other things that we pointed to, some of these other pages full of properties and customizations. You could easily run with something like this, where you just, all you've got is, some names and some data types, especially some generic kind of data types, and you're off and running. You don't have to go much further than that to be, ready to build your site and administer it. So this is a Django Admin tool in particular is a very powerful data modifier and data browser. You can, like I said, you can go every one of those records. You could look at the details. You could change the default for the listing, so you can quickly browse the data that matters to you. It does provide a rich set of tools to customize that stuff as you need to make it useful for you. It makes it real easy to manage and track migrations as you create and advance features and see the growth of a schema for data. And the admin site's just the tip of the iceberg. So we're just getting started. This is sort of like I said, this is our introduction into Django and Python. And the admin side is just dealing with the database and the data itself. Now, as we go further and we start flipping over to the front end, we're going to see how powerful it is to build full-blown user interfaces as well. Questions and comments?
Hey there, Rob. So I took a note to, as you mentioned, it looks so powerful to control your back end. I wanted to ask around the controllability of the table structure and the column structure. I should say the table names and column names. For instance, can you switch from a snake case to Pascal case, whatever, can you control that within this UI, within the models UI, or even just the models class?
Now, the class itself is going to be case sensitive. The way it defaults, I think you can. I have not dug into that because it tends to go safe. So, like for example, if you look, it just keeps them all lowercase within the actual table names. But if you look at, so for example, here you can see a couple of these where it does it for the table names, but it does not do it for the columns. So the columns are actually, let me show you a couple of these because that may help a little bit.
I see a feed
like here, for example, these like status ID is something that I created. It's all lowercase. Look up, let's see. Image link has got a capital L, and post date has a capital D. Those are defined within the class. Yeah. That's how I listed those. So if I flipped over to, and that was what, user feed item. Oops, let me go it this way. That's user feed item post. So if I go to, here, so user feed item post. Now, so I can see here where I've got the camel case, post date, and image link. Now, user feed item, for example, is a class since it's a foreign key. So that's going to reference the user feed item class within Django. Then you'll see where it actually is. And this is how I can see it's a foreign key is it's that class name _ ID. So if I look at this, I will see for user feed item, I will see integers. And so I can see, which is what you would normally see. So that gives me the primary key to the user feed item table. However, that's the nice thing is when I'm working with it within Django, I don't need to worry about that ID at all. I can actually create, I have a user feed item instance, and it under the covers will go figure that out as far as what the ID is and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so from there, my mind was on a CRUD generators or something like that, where they require certain syntax or certain structure to your names, and it may need to be tweaked with, but I'm sure it looks like it can be done pretty easily. The
You
next,
can,
oh, go ahead.
I know you can you can make some adjustments to the migration engine or whatever it is. There are some things you can do. I don't know how limited or not that is, but I think if you've got a certain naming standards or styles, I think you can make it work almost out of the box. You may have to do some customizations, but if you are careful how you generate those names and create those names within Django, then it'll work within the database. And you can through labels and some stuff like that, because this approach, the way I've got it, is my class property names are the same as my column names. You don't have to do that. You can actually, and I don't think I have an example here where I did it, but I can actually essentially do an alias name that I could do that would, I think, is it called alias? Yeah, so I think it's called alias. So I could actually come in and say this alias is actually, let's say name or something like that. So there's some things I can do with it. To say that I use, for example, if I use one naming standard for my classes and another naming standard for my database names, then I can actually, within this, I can actually handle both of those. The one that I'm going to see as a user or a developer with class instances, and the one that I use the database, or I guess actually with this, it also maps to what a user would see for default labels and stuff like that.
That's cool. That's cool. You were right there where I kind of had a subsequent question where you're defining the models, and this is, I guess, more my ignorance with Python. Is it common to have the model definitions, your names and properties, all that, alongside of some of the behaviors that you would typically see maybe in a service layer? Is that a common structure for Django to follow? For instance, your user feed, you have your feeds, you have your user properties, and so on and so forth for the model. But then you have a method for unsubscribing.
You can. I don't. Yeah, as far as actual standards are, I've seen it done a couple different ways, and this is very much a. I will call it a brute force, simplified way that I'm doing this. You can actually split stuff out. So I could include, if I wanted, I could actually have multiple models tables, and I can include them in. I can split out admin. I can do it like I have with some of these, where I have a straight model, and then I could have something else that does the manipulations. And I actually do that in this case. I have some. I've gone back and forth on this one, and it's based on how I've been building this and how I've architected it. This is more personal. I prefer to keep stuff where it is specific to a model. So if it's got like here, it's unsubscribe feed, it's an action on that model, then I keep it within that class. But I have separately, if I go over to like views, where I've got a lot of work that gets done there, I've got some of these where I'm doing direct. I'm either making direct SQL calls, or working within the model as well, because the model actually provides tools to be able to like quickly select all without doing SQL. And so I actually go back and forth on those. Partially it is issues that it's probably my lack of getting deeply into what the models provide and what some of those built-in features are, and me just saying I'm going to take the shortcut and do direct SQL. Um,
I get you. It's
but you
kind of
can do it. And like I said, I think yeah, the short answer is yes and no. I think you can do it whatever way makes most sense to you. And I think that's from what I've seen, it actually comes from people's other experience. So developers that are used to how Java tends to do stuff, it will look more like the Java approach. If they do more, let's say C++, then it'll probably look a little more like how C++ would use it. It's that's sort of the strength and weakness of Python is that it allows you to do that however you want to. So you could have, and I have seen that where you have very um, almost incoherent approaches to the code because you can see because it wasn't enforced, you can see where it looks like one developer did some code and another developer did some other code. And I even do that to myself sometime where I come in with one mindset and use one way, and then I come in with a different mindset and I'm coding a different way, and I sort of have to slap my hands and say, hey, don't do that. Pick one and do it.
I'm just as guilty myself.
Well, good. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one that does that. But I think, and we all do. We just, that's where the nice thing with this is once you get into a rhythm of it and you sort of get a templated approach to building those out, then I think you're going to be more likely to stick with that.
Gotcha. And final question around some of the permissioning. Uh, Again, I'm just thinking really deep into the flexibility of it, where you, for instance, have a group that has its set of permissions, you assign that to a user. It's really me just being curious, are you able to take off individual permissions once a user is in a group? It's kind of really nitty gritty, but it's just a question.
You can not, it does not have negative permissions. So if I want to take, let me push these permissions over. Let me just do all auth just to be safe, just to make it easy to see. And then, well, actually, let me do this. So if I create this test group and I give it these permissions, and I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go back over because we can play with that for a second. So if I go to users, and I'm going to create a new user that's just called test. And I'm just going to give them a very simple, stupid password, assuming that I can. So I'm going to save him. Oh, password. Let's do something crazy and see if that'll allow me to do that. Come on. Unfortunately, this is there we go. Okay, so now I added this guy. So I added this guy. I can make him part of this group. Now, note as groups and permissions are separate. So if I save, which means they're additive. So here, because I have this group, I have all those permissions, but I don't, but those permissions still exist down here. So I could specifically add them to the user. So I could say, I always want this guy to be able to do this, even if I change the group. But what I cannot do is say, based on, I know that he has all auth and content types. I think I gave him there. I know that he has all auth and content type that I gave him based on this group, but I cannot then say, oh, he's got something that overrides it. So it's an additive instead of you do not have negative permissions.
I see.
So you would want to create the most restrictive groups. I guess if you wanted to do that, you would create very restrictive groups and then add permissions, or you can make multiple groups. So you could even do it based on like a table. So I could have a group called user token, user targets, user target, and each of those I could grant those groups as I wanted to. Or I could do, let's say, delete. I could have a group that is all the delete stuff, and nobody has delete except for the delete group, and then I could give them the delete. Yeah, so there's things like that, but it's not which I think in some ways is easier to maintain because
Yeah.
it's either you have it or you don't. Not that you have it and then you may, negate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that negative permissioning is not as common, is it? I don't think.
No, and it's for the couple of places that I've had to deal with it, it is annoying. It has some power because then you can shut something off. You can yank a write from somebody very quickly. But I find it's, if you want to do something like that, it's easier to just deactivate them real quick or something like that,
Yeah.
and then adjust their rights and permissions. Good questions, good comments. And those will be things I think we'll probably explore more as we go further into this stuff, as we'll get into the front end side of this stuff. We'll also probably end up swinging back around at some point into the admin and go a little deeper because there's, as we've seen already, probably from the models a little bit, there are some connections with those and how they impact each other. All right. Other questions and comments? All right. If anybody's saying anything, you're on mute. Otherwise, we will continue forward. All right, and that'll wrap this one up. So thank you. As always, appreciate your time. If you have any questions or anything else, if you start playing around with this stuff, and you want to ask me what I found or any of the, want me to point you to information or anything like that, or if you've got, some additional areas that you want us to cover as we move forward, got a bunch of different ways you can reach us. Hit us at info@developernoir.com. Contact us, form out on the developernoir.com site. Follow us on Twitter at developernoir. Facebook.com. We actually do have the Developernoir page. And we're just going to keep throwing this stuff out there and doing these things as we continue to make every developer better. And have yourself a good